بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد إن الدين عند الله الإسلام صدق الله العظيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم وصل عليه الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا سيدي يا حبيب الله. Respected ulama ikram, elders, brothers in Islam, first and foremost my thanks to Masjid Usmani and to Sunni Dawate Islami for this invitation and for holding such an important seminar in which our youngsters are reminded about the beauty and perfection of our religion. You have to understand that the way that our parents passed on Islam and the way today we have to pass on Islam to our children is two very different things. When our parents passed on Islam to us, it was natural, it was easy. It was something which came to our head very, very simply. It was something which coincided with what we saw from great Muslims. People who practiced Islam, people who contributed to society. In this day and age, there is no bigger task ahead of us than to ensure that Islam is passed on to our children safely and harmoniously. And you don't have to think too much to understand how difficult that is in this day and age. Terrorist attacks now are something that happen every single week. Because there is so much violence now on our screens, and unfortunately a lot of it is ascribed to so-called Muslims, is that it doesn't mean anything to us anymore. And there's something wrong there. Only a few days ago, there was almost a mass grave of children that was dug up in Nigeria, of mainly Muslim female children. No one batted an eyelid. It didn't mean anything to anyone. I think either today or yesterday, young kids, they went to play football in Iraq. Now, I play football myself, you know that, most of you. For me, football is a joyous occasion. For me, football is an occasion where you can get some air into your lungs, enjoy yourself. These kids, they never came back from that football game. So there's a lot of violence and there's a lot of things which go against the very basics of our religion. Inshallah ta'ala, what I want to show today, very, very briefly, is to show you one hadith sharif of our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, so that our children understand that extremism and terrorism has no place in our religion. There is no basis to it whatsoever. But in order to do that, and this might be somewhat strange, I need to tell you what extremism first is. I need to explain to you what terrorism is. So I'll spend a moment on that, then just one hadith sharif, and then I will begin with then, what is extremism? In Islam, you have to understand that in Islam we talk about the middle path so much. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described this ummah as ummatan wasata, those people who adhere to the middle path. We call that moderation. Moderation means basically when it comes to, I don't know, a packet of crisp, it means that you have it, but you don't have it every single meal. You don't have it every single day. You're going to get sick of it. Even when it comes to the most basic food, the Prophet ﷺ said, don't have too much, don't have too little. Eggs are good for you. But if you have too many eggs, it can cause a lot of problems. Meat, subhanallah, is food from Jannah. This is the words of our Prophet ﷺ. But even consuming too much meat is damaging to your health. Water, obviously we know very well of how important it is. There is such circumstances where you can have too much water. Islam says when it comes to eating, when it comes to drinking, when it comes to consumption, when it comes to friendship, when it comes to ibadah, everything, try to be middle. Don't overdo it, don't underdo it. This is what moderation is. So understand what moderation first in Islam is. Islam says do a small amount that can actually help you. Don't overdo things and don't underdo things. Extremism is basically when you do too little or you do too much. And in Islam, extremism has no place. I'm sure you will understand that from the hadith sharif that I'm about to recite to you. If a person, for example, reads naats all night long, now this is something good, isn't it? to praise the Prophet ﷺ all night long. But in the morning, if he misses Fajr prayer, we say Allahu Akbar. What was the purpose then? This is extremism. This is wrong. People are branding the machete and the sword to show how Islam is a religion of truth. It's a contradiction. It doesn't make sense, does it? This is extremism. So extremism is when you turn away from moderation. When you're doing too little or too much and now you turn away from it, that is extremism. What is terrorism? Terrorism is when that extremism is now expressed in words and in action. That is what terrorism is now. When you have an extremist view inside you, and now physically, verbally, you are letting people know that you are an extremist, and that now is terrorism. Islam has no place for that whatsoever, and the reason for that is the hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari, which has been reported in other books of ahadith as well. 3 companions came to our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's home, and with the best of intentions, the best possible intention, they wanted to ask the family of our Prophet alaihi salatu wasallam, please let us find out how the Prophet alaihi salatu wasallam performs ibadat and worship in private. He is the best possible example. He is a uswa hasana, a perfect role model. Let us learn from the best example. Let us find out what he used to do, for example, at home, so we can apply it to our own lives. In detail, they were informed about what the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam used to do. And all 3 of them, and rightly so, they thought, subhanallah, this is amazing amount. This is our Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam performing so much ibadat, so much dedication for the sake of his Lord. All 3 of them turned away and went home, and they made a solemn promise. They made a covenant with themselves. After hearing how the Prophet ﷺ used to perform worship, the first one, he said to himself and to others around him that from now on, I am not going to sleep at night. All I am going to do each and every night is spend the night in the mosque or on the musalla and performing nafal prayers. This is my intention from now on. The second person, he said, from now on, in the daytime, I am never going to eat or drink. Each and every day for the rest of my life, Ramadan aside, even outside Ramadan, I am going to fast purely for the sake of Allah. The third person, he said, when it comes to family life, I'm going to cut myself off. No marriage, no children. I'm going to live in a cave, have a tasbih and say Allahu. All 3 of them did this with the best possible intention. And you have to understand that the intention here was not in any way extremist. The intention here was not anything wrong. Their thinking was that subhanallah, here is the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam who is maghfoor, forgiven. He is ma'soom. He is sinless. He has never committed a mistake in his entire life, and yet he is worshipping Allah this much. We on the other hand, we are not ma'soom. We on the other hand, we are not protected by Allah. So clearly we need to do more ibadat than the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Eventually, Sayyiduna Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, he heard about these 3 individuals. All 3 cases, they were extreme. They were ultra and they were radical. It showed what we call tashdeed. Tashdeed comes from the word shiddah, which means too severe. The intention was right, but it was radical. It was too much. It meant no sleep. It meant no food. It meant no water. It meant no time for laughs with your family and with your children. What was the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's reaction, do you think? Do you think that he called them over and gave them a big hug and said, subhanallah, these are my lovely servants? Do you think he congratulated them in front of all of his companions? Do you think he was happy with the situation when one said, I'm going to spend a whole night in nafal, I'm going to spend all day in fasting, I'm going to cut myself off from family life? Do you think he was happy? Absolutely not. In fact, this was one of those rare occasions where Sayyiduna Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam was quite angry. And this is a big thing for the Rahmatan lil Alameen sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And he explained to his companions, all of them, he said, don't step away from moderation. Don't push yourself too much. Never try to do too much or too little. And he explained that I am the one who is closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but I still eat. No one is closer to my Lord than I. But I fast and sometimes I don't fast. No one is more perfect than myself, yet I have a family life. And then he went on to explain, فَمَنْ رَغِبَ عَنْ سُنَّتِي فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. Whoever turns away from my sunnah, he's not from me then. He's not from me. So very clearly the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam said, you are not going to fast all day. You are not going to read nafal all night. You are not going to cut yourself off from family life. Why? Because this is extremism. Extremism is wrong. And this is the most important point, in particular for our elders. If there was any area in Islam where extremism would be allowed, meaning you could go to the utmost limit. If there was any area in Islam, any portion, any facet of Islam where extremism would be allowed, it would be in ibadat. It would be in worship. But the Prophet ﷺ said, you are not going to even be extremist in your worship. Even that is forbidden. Mu'adh bin Jabal radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, once he led the prayer of some Muslims outside the Prophet ﷺ's mosque. And he led the prayer, and this was Fajr prayer. In the first rakat, he recited Surah Al-Baqarah. Surah Al-Baqarah, let me put that into perspective. In the month of Ramadan, it takes the Imam 2 nights to finish Surah Al-Baqarah. 2 nights it takes to finish Surah Al-Baqarah in Ramadan. 40 rakats basically. So Mu'adh bin Jabal, he read that in 1 rakat. One individual from that prayer, when he saw that it was this long, he said, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. He left the Jamaat and he read his own prayer. Mu'adh bin Jabal, who is a companion, he heard about this later. Because this guy's a munafiq. He's a hypocrite. How dare he leave my Jamaat? I'm leading the prayer, I'm reciting Surah Al-Baqarah, subhanallah, and this guy leaves my prayer. The report went to Sayyiduna Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Mu'adh bin Jabal radiyallahu ta'ala anhu said, here is a man who left my Jama'ah. The individual said, here is a man who read Surah Al-Baqarah in the first rakat. Whose side did the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam take? He took the side not of Mu'adh bin Jabal, but this companion who left the Jama'at. Not only that, but he told Mu'adh bin Jabal off. He said to him, Afattanu anta? Afattanu anta? Afattanu anta? Are you causing fitna, O Mu'adh? Are you causing trouble? If you are reading alone, then do it how long you want. If you are reading with Jama'ah, recite Sabbihisma Rabbikal A'la in the first rakat. Again, the point is what? There is no extremism in our religion. If extremism was allowed in any area, it would have been allowed in ibadat. It would have been allowed in worship. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not allow it there. So how on earth is he going to allow it anywhere else? And upon this I will conclude. If we cannot be extreme in worship, do you think our religion allows us to be extreme when it comes to dealing with others, Muslims and non-Muslims? If the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said you cannot fast all of the time because it is ultra, because it is radical, because it's way over the top, do you think your religion allows you to strap a suicide bomb on your chest and walk into a marketplace? Kill people who you never have seen before, you don't even know whether they are Muslims or non-Muslims? If Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, stop, I don't want you performing nafal all night long, do you think he would allow to kill random people in the streets, in the cafes, in the football grounds, in the theaters? What's wrong with you? Right now, what is happening in Iraq and in Syria, this is the work of Jahannamis. They are the works of murtads. They are the works of kafirs. They have got nothing to do with our religion. If you want to understand your religion, then understand it through Ala Hazrat Fazil al-Barelvi rahmatullah. And it's ironic. It's totally ironic at a time where people are doubting the work of Ala Hazrat. And they don't realize that the perfect antidote and the perfect cure for this extremism is the works of Ala Hazrat. Why? Because Ala Hazrat, despite the many volumes of work he wrote, despite the amazing detail he went to, you can summarize his whole philosophy in 2 simple words, Mahabbati Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. If all of the time you are reminding yourself about how compassionate he is, how kind he was, how he was a mercy not just for humans, but for kafirs as well, for animals, for plants even, then for a moment, not even for a moment, will you entertain the idea that he will encourage violence against others. So in this day and age, we find that, subhanallah, people are turning away from the religion of Islam. People are hating words like Sharia. The way to actually stop that is to talk about words which they do not use. Use the word mahabbat. Use the word joining. If people call everybody else in the wrong way, we call them in a positive way. Use that as much as possible. Right now, and I'm sorry to say, we're living in very, very difficult times. We are living in a year when the most racist of individuals will become the President of the United States of America. This is not a joke anymore. It's going to happen. It's a reality. It's a fact. Donald Trump is going to be the next President of the United States of America. Whether you like it or not, that makes him perhaps the most strongest individual in the entire world. Every single time, and you have to understand this, who are the biggest supporters of Donald Trump right now? Who is supporting Donald Trump the most? Is it the conservatives? Is it the Republicans? Is it the Tea Party in America? Is it the conservative press? Is it the New York Times? It's none of these. None of these are the biggest supporters of Donald Trump right now. The biggest supporters of Donald Trump right now are Daesh. Face it. Because every single time a terrorist attack happens in which Muslims are involved or supposedly involved, Donald Trump laughs his head off and he says to himself, well, that's another 100,000 voters in my pocket. Whatever bakwas I have been coming out with at the anti-Muslim sentiment, whatever is happening in Belgium, whatever is happening in Paris, whatever is happening in London is supporting me. So right now, you have to understand that if you don't give the impression and you don't give the right view of Islam, the view of Muhabbat Rasul, you are all doomed. We are all doomed. There's no way out of this. So please, as much as possible, and it seems somewhat far-fetched almost, this idea of Allah Hazrat being the solution to our problems. You might think that this is going a touch too far. Believe me, it's the reality. The more you talk in language of love, compassion and mercy, the less time you have for hatred. It's simple. So in this day and age, with our Muslims as well, number one, detach yourself from anyone with extremist aqidah. Because when you have a filthy aqidah, eventually that will come out into filth in words and actions, which is exactly what terrorism is. If you have people who say, I don't celebrate my own birthday, you know very well they're not going to celebrate the Prophet ﷺ's birthday as well. Stay away from them. Stay away from them. If people in any form, they say to you, suggest they have sympathy with Taliban, with Al-Qaeda, with Osama bin Laden, with Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, phone the police. You're not a grass. Tell your teacher. Because if you don't, then they are going to do something even worse. You're not an informer, you're not a grass. You're doing what your Prophet ﷺ told you to do, which is Amr bil Ma'ruf, Nahi anil Munkar. This is part of your iman, you will be rewarded for it. In terms of thought as well, make sure anyone on your timeline, anyone in your Facebook, who you know is a terrorist or who has terrorist tendencies, walk away. Have nothing to do with it. And this can be in many, many different forms. We have to preserve our iman in this day and age. In this day and age, I look at my own children, I look at these children here as well. And I think, Allahu Akbar, they are going to grow up in an environment where people don't just talk about negative about Islam, they hate Islam. You have to turn that around. And it starts with us in this mosque by bringing people together, by trying as much as possible to apply the beautiful seerah of our Prophet in the roads, in the streets, in the neighborhood, in the college, in the universities. And I'm sure that Sunni Dawate Islami in general and Masjid Usmani in particular, they will continue to do the great work to ensure that we can tackle radicalism, that we can tackle this extremism and ensure that our youngsters, they grow up being proper Ashiq Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. People who understand only the language of love. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroy our enemies. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala infuse in our hearts the message of all of the great, the message of Muhabbat Rasul. Ameen. Wa ma alayna illa al-balaghul mubin.